Good afternoon, everyone. Wee Woo here, and this is going to be a different type of video. I'm going to give a bit of a tip and a bit of a tutorial on a more advanced topic on Zeusing, simply because I got into a nice conversation with a Patreon last night and went over how to do this sort of thing, so I thought I'd make a little video. But he sent me a picture. I didn't have this speedboat minigun, had a Mark V SOCOM boat going through, but I have a different mod set loaded because I want to show the utility of this tactic. But he commented on how the Freedom was broken apart like this and wondered how it was possible. So, I mean, that looks pretty cool from this angle. You got a broken Freedom, looks like it got had a few bombs or torpedo land in the middle, and now it's sunk in the water, and you're going by on a boat. That looks pretty nice. But let me pull the curtain out and show you guys what it really looks like. That's not one Freedom, that's two Freedoms. And this is a common Zeus tactic where we use illusion to add to immersion. So through that, now that you know what it looks like, as you can see, if you use water to hide it, it looks like it's a single ship. There's a way to do it with a single ship, but you have to do that in Zeus, and that can be very difficult. But I will go through that method, as well as another method you can do it in Zeus through attach commands. But the easiest way to do all this is in Eden Editor. So I'm going to go over a few buttons up here as well and show you guys how to make this from scratch. So first thing you're going to want to do is type in freed. Go to props, it'll be right there, the USS Freedom. This tactic works for any ship, and I'll go over the Liberty, and I'll, since I have the Star Wars mod set loaded, I will load a few Star Wars ships and show that to you as well, and I'll even do it in the ground, because, they're ships, so it makes sense. They, go in space. So, before you want to do any work, after you put your first one down, you're going to want to make sure that toggle vertical mode is set to an arrow going over the terrain, and surface snapping is set to go through the line. Now, let me show you why. If we take surface snapping and put it to the line where the lines are going into the ground, notice how this is not going into the water when I drag down. If I turn this off and it's going through the line, I can now get it into the fucking water. And that's going to be needed to, hide the other half of the ship in the water. And you're going to want vertical mode toggled, because if it's like this, and I Control-C, Control-Shift-V, first off, it's going to put it over the ground like that, which is a pain in the ass. And the second thing is, it's going to hug the terrain underneath it and try to follow it. So notice how that ship in the back is following the terrain around, and that can, throw your alignments off, and it's a big pain in the ass. So you're going to want vertical mode like this. Now, over here, in order to get the angles right, you're going to want to click on the rotation widget. Now, depending on how you want to do this and your different angles, you can either do it like this, or you can set it to a box, or excuse me, a cube right here on your toggle widget coordinate space. This will let you get a more exact angle that will be exactly lined up to the previous ship. However, I like to have a bit of variation in my ships when I make these wrecks, so I prefer to do a toggle kinda like this, and then you can also rotate it slightly, depending on what angle you want. You always want it to be a bit of a lower angle itself. Now, one more thing, notice if you move this, it'll stay like this. That won't always happen for all your ship structures, so just to play it safe, I recommend you go back to the translation widget and then turn this onto the sphere. That way, when you move it, it won't go into the ground like this. Though that can help you find a good angle. You're going to want to line this big thing up with that big thing right there. So, just moving this around like so. Notice how I'm putting it in the tall structure so it kind of hides it. And then all you got to do is then drag it down. And there you go. That is a different blown up freedom that we just made. Now, of course, the same thing works with the Liberty. I mean, the Liberty, it's small enough you could just fragment it on its own, but just in case you want to do a dual fragment, whoops, got to Shift-C, Shift-V that. All I would do is just go back to the rotation widget, curve it up slightly, up and down, and then you just gotta go to translation. Throw that puppy down. Now, there's a lot of tall structures right here, so I can easily give it away. So what I'd recommend is, you know, play around a bit. Try to get it lined up like that. Use some tougher angles for your bigger ships. But then again, I'd just recommend doing one texture and just kind of putting it in the ground like this, because, or just like capsizing it, you know, rotate it around. That'll give you the same effect. But if you want some like really catastrophic battle damage, you can always do something like this. See, that's believable. And then if you put them in enough, you know, that can look like the same single ship, but you know, you get your parts. So now if we backspace, you know, we got a Liberty wreck, we have a Freedom wreck, and then to show you guys, you know, what one rotated ship can look like, we can do something like this, where, how about instead, it's gonna do that, hold on. Let's take the Freedom like this, and then we'll just capsize her. Like so. We can do a sideways capsize. Yeah? Nice little things. Now, I did mention that, you know, I'm using my Star Wars mod set for the 212. So one quick thing I want to show off, something I like to do in my missions. Go to swap objects. Let's go to static ships. Let me grab a nice big ship here. First Order Dreadnought. I mean, this thing is frickin' massive, right? But let's say it like crashed in the ground or something. So you can do the same tactics. You can, you know, rotate it and then just wedge her in the ground like this. You can say that, you know, the ground's kind of consumed her. She partially crashed inside. But if we also wanted, we could... Gotta reselect this. It's too big for me to find its damn module. But yeah, so it's all the way down there, actually. What we could do is you could, you know, put a piece of it like this. And then just rotate it back. Edit around its rotation a bit. So you have this wide piece, and then, you know, take it down like this. This one's a bit tougher because the bridge is pretty frickin' massive. But if you line it up right, I mean, you know, two pieces of our First Order Dreadnought just kind of blown up. Now, if you really wanted to do icing on the cake, what I would also recommend is take this, turn her around, and you don't want the bridge, so I'd actually like recommend flipping her over. But again, this is a hard texture I've decided to pick because of these ground cannons. So what I would do, something like this. There you go. That's like a, you could put an AO in the middle of right here and say, you know, do it on a desert planet. Say you have a dune in the middle, and this is your AO, and it's in the middle of a First Order Dreadnought, you know? That's pretty cool, actually. I've never considered something like that. But, you know, as always, you can also hide it in the water. So like a Providence, for example. I love using this texture. I mean, you can just literally, boop, and put it in the water like that, and then control sheets. If you don't even have to repaste, you can just put another one down, rotate it the other way, and then, you know, just drag down, and poof, there's your Providence broken in the ocean. Easy. Now, I did mention that there were ways to do this in Zeus, so I'm going to cut the video for a second and put my Zeus module down. Alright, now here we are in the Zeus interface. And let me first start by saying I do not recommend you template the ships this way, because you don't have the rotation widget, and you're kind of at the mercy, if you will. You'll see what I mean in a second, but you're at the mercy of how your physics decide to work. But first off, the first method only works with the Freedom and the Liberty, and I think it would work with the Nimitz too, but they have to be in pieces. Now what I mean by that is if I were to go to Freedom, now it would be under Spawn, because it's a big thing. It'll let me line it up, so I'll click that. This is with Achilles, by the way. Now, notice how, it's a single texture that you can, select and delete like that, but it didn't move the ship with it. And that is because the ship itself is actually in a million little fucking pieces. So let me set this to 150 to add, and boom. This is what you get. So, easy way to do it is I would just take it, put it in the water like so. Now, you got to be careful with when you do this, because notice 150 wasn't actually enough to add it all. So if you, bring the pieces in like this, notice how they're going to, break apart. You're going to have to realign them manually, which is, again, one of the reasons I don't recommend you do this. But it has its purpose. So, if I were to template this like so, I mean, what's gonna work better? Because again, you can't rotate in the Zeus interface. I mean, does this look believable, or does this look believable? You know what I mean? But again, it does have its purpose, and let me show you exactly where. So let me make a new one. I'll put it right here. This time I'm going to do an add 250 command. I don't want to delete that texture, but I want to delete half of those. So now, you also got to be careful with the rotation. But now what if I were to do something like this? Again, be careful on the rotation, because this is how it can easily fuck you. But sometimes, if you're able to, put it at a certain height so it ignores rotation, you can kind of put it partially on the, ground and say that, half of it's underwater and the other half's in the ocean. This works a bit better with the Liberty, since it's a smaller ship, but again, it comes templated. So instead, what you might want to consider doing, finding a big texture and say she, ran aground somewhere, but notice how she kind of curves like that, and the whole structure follows it. So you might just want to move that, So delete the first half. Say it, came in or got blown off, however you want to place it. But again, it's better, this method is better for just putting it in the water to make it look good. But, it's not the best method. Definitely not the best method. So, the other way you can do it is something I don't recommend with the Freedom or the Liberty, because you're going to have to attach every single part. But if we were to go to Star Wars, swap objects, static ships, let me find an acclimator, because this is what I like to do. First off, these textures come in one single piece, so if you have this and notice it's moving around, you could actually always find a small little hill to put these on, and then just line it up, and it'll kind of curve in for you, and you can get these really cool shots like this. And that's all I had to do, just find a hill and curve it. But let's say you want something a bit more dramatic. What you're going to need to do is a little set of attachment commands. So, depending on how you want it to fall, how you want the physics to work, this is going to vary greatly. So I'm going to use what I normally use, and that's little birds. because they have the best physics for this sort of thing. So what I'm going to do is set my little bird to invincible. Now I'm going to disable the simulation of both the little bird and the the acclimator. So disable, select both things. Now let's say I want this to fall heavy on the right side. So I want this to be in the ground, but I want to keep everything else. So what I'm going to do is put the little bird right here. I'm going to attach it, the acclimator, to this. That's okay if you see it edit like that. It'll go away after you re-enable the simulation. Now notice how she's gonna fall like so. Surprised, her engine actually cut off for her. Now, if you cut her fuel, she's just gonna slowly glance down, so what you might want to consider doing is this. Just have the crew bail out. So again, this is where the unpredictability of the physics kind of kicks in. But, as you can see, that's starting to come in. And right as she goes in the ground, before she bounces against the ground, hit the delete key. And now look at that. I have, as I said, my acclimator has that side in the ground, and it's kind of facing up, and it's kind of caught on an angle of the ship. And in my opinion, that would actually be believable. And it's a bit more on the ground. If I wanted more to be on the ground, I'd put the little bird a bit closer in the center. But this is where you're going to have to play a lot with this. I'm not going to show multiple examples because this is something you just have to play around with to really get it, in my opinion. But depending on where you line up your helicopter, and different helicopters fall at different angles at different speeds. But basically just attach, fall, delete. That's all you got to do. And you can line stuff up in the Zeus interface. So anyway, guys, I hope you enjoyed this little video. Very informative. It was a nice conversation I had last night, but again, my preferred way is to do it in an editor, but if you have to, you can always, make do in the Zeus interface with attach commands, so long as it's not multi-part, because, don't get me wrong, it is possible, but it's an absolute pain in the ass. So anyway, guys, my name's Weewoo. Enjoy, the rest of your day. Hope you learned something. Otherwise, take care. Have a good one.